Welcome to Humble Beginnings, the Undrafted Podcast. I'm your host, Rochelle Hamilton Jr. And on today's episode 23, man, it's been an eventful week in the National Football League. We got 3 players who have gotten bags from the NFL. I mean, backed up the Brinks truck in the National Football League. Aaron Rodgers got a record deal. Aaron Donald got a record deal from the Rams, which, by the way, it's a good week to be named Aaron in the National Football League. And, of course, Odell Beckham Jr. gets his money. Then the Raiders and the Chicago Bears, they shocked the NFL world with the trade of Khalil Mack. He got a record deal. So, I mean, it's just money flying all around the National Football League this week. So, coming up on episode 23 of the Undrafted Podcast, I'm going to talk a little bit about those. We also got Jerry Jones. He went off. Somebody needs to take the microphone away from Jerry Jones. He's in favor of an 18-game schedule, but some way, somehow, NFL owners are pushing for an 18-game schedule, but they still want us to believe that they are all aboard with player safety. But anyway, Teddy Bridgewater, he was traded to the Saints last week, which is a great situation for him to be in. I can think of almost no better place for Teddy Bridgewater to be at this point in his career as he still works his way back from that knee injury. So we got a lot of issues and a lot of topics to talk about on the Undrafted Podcast. So we'll go ahead and get started with the low with Ro. Well, Odell Beckham Jr. got paid, bruh. OBJ got those bags. He and the Giants came to an agreement on a 5-year contract extension worth $95 million total with $65 million in guarantees. This is the richest wide receiver contract in NFL history. And the question has been, does he deserve it? And I say absolutely. Odell Beckham Jr. deserves this contract. He's been the most productive player on the New York Giants since he arrived in 2014, and nobody has produced more than OBJ through their first 47 games. Check this out. Through his first 47 games, he's got the most catches, he's got the second most yards, he's tied for 5th in TDs, and the most 100-yard games in that span. No other player in NFL history has that much production through his first 47 games. And then when you factor in, this is with him missing the majority of last season due to injury, as well as parts of previous seasons due to injuries. So on the field, Odell Beckham Jr. just needs to continue to be Odell Beckham Jr. Now, you would like for him to be a little more healthy. You'd like him to be able to fight through more injuries and things like that, but that's something that's out of his control. But on the field, you would be hard-pressed to find a wide receiver who will go out and who will outperform and outproduce OBJ. With this big investment, though, the Giants are pretty much telling him that they're looking for more leadership in the locker room and off the field from him because we've seen the instances off the field. Now, on the field, just continue to be Odell. He can improve. We all can improve because no matter who you are or what you do, we can all get better at certain aspects of our lives because OBJ had too many drops in 2016 and 2017. The little bit that he played in 2017. But as far, overall, continue to be Odell Beckham Jr. on the field. Now, in the locker room, he's got to become more of a leader because anytime a team pays you this kind of money, a record deal, they're telling you without telling you that they want you to become a bigger leader in the locker room. They want you to have more of a leadership presence to the other guys on the squad. They want you to hold yourself to a higher standard as well as guys in the locker room because when you get this kind of money, when a team makes this kind of investment in you, everybody's watching. And if Odell Beckham Jr. doesn't become a leader for the Giants in that locker room after this kind of investment, the Giants are in trouble. Now, the Giants, they're looking for him to mature more, less offseason headlines for the wrong reasons, no more boat trips before big playoff games. He had the incident with the kicking net a few years ago, which, he really kind of turned into like a funny ordeal. But no more instances like that. The fighting with Josh Norman, which there's going to be on-field fights in the NFL. I mean, that's just a given. You got all that testosterone on the field. You got pushing and shoving, and you just get the natural heat from competition. There's going to be incidences like that, but it doesn't need to boil over like it did between him and Josh Norman a few years ago. You had the incident this past offseason with the Instagram model and the white pizza and the white substance with the pizza in the Paris hotel room. They want to see less of that And they want to see more of the stuff that he was steadily posting on social media in the offseason. If you paid attention to Odell's Instagram and his social media in the offseason, the dude, he showed how hard of a worker that he is. The dude works hard. He's one of the hardest working guys in the NFL if you've ever seen his training videos. You know, he eats right. He takes care of his body. Like he does in that aspect. There's nothing more that you can really ask for him to do as far as taking care of his body, as far as preparing for the season physically, you know, because when it comes to the physical aspect, he does everything he needs to do to be the best football player that he can be. He's just got to be more of a locker room leader, which means, you know, grinding hard when you don't feel like it, doing things you don't feel like doing. You know, when you become a leader, Chris Carter said it best. When you become a leader, it's a chance for you to lead the right way, or it's a chance for you to lead the wrong way. Now, at that point, you just got to pick which way you're going to lead. Now, personally, I think in the end, Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be fine because he's a good-hearted dude. He likes to be around people. He just likes to have a good time. You know, now maybe he likes to have, you know, too good of a time, but at the end of the day, he's a good-natured guy. You know, he's got a fiery, spirited personality on the field. He's just one of those dudes that when he's on, when he's on, he ups everybody's level of play. Like, he's a box office type of player. Because when people go to see the New York Giants, in a big part, they're going to see Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, you got fans that go to the Giants warm-ups just to watch him make those circus catches, just to watch him make those one-handed catches. I mean, and this is a dude who's running around without pads. Like, he's just catching the ball. You know, in any other NFL game, you know, with any other team, that wouldn't really be that big of a deal. But when you make the kind of catches that OBJ does, and when you bring the kind of spirit that he brings to the game, he's a fun player to watch. Like, I love watching this guy play. And that's another reason why the Giants gave him that big contract. He brings anticipations. He brings anticipation. He brings audience. Like, he brings numbers. He's got that star power. And with that star power, Odell Beckham Jr. is the face of the New York Giants now. It's an Eli Manning. I'm not going to say it's OBJ's team, but he's definitely the face of that franchise now. That one-handed grab on Sunday Night Football back in 2014, his rookie year against the Dallas Cowboys, that's when Odell Beckham Jr. let the world know that he was here and there would be more of that to come. That was his announcement that he was in the National Football League. So, you know, with this contract, I'm happy for Odell Beckham Jr. I'm glad that he got the money he was looking for. Now I'm looking forward to seeing him taking those big steps, continuing to be the great football player that he is, as well as improve on that, and really just become more of a leader in that locker room. Because once he does take that next step forward, the New York Giants as a whole, they're going to be a whole lot better. And Odell Beckham Jr., he's already a force. It's just going to his force field, if you want to say, it's just going to expand. So I'm really excited to see what Odell Beckham Jr. is going to do moving forward. Moving on to another NFL star who got paid this past week, Aaron Rodgers. He secured the bag last week too. He signed a 4-year extension with the Green Bay Packers that turns out to be the largest contract in NFL history. Overall, this contract is worth well north of $100 million in guaranteed money. Man, check these numbers out. The way this contract is written out, Aaron Rodgers will get a ton of his money right away. He gets a $57.5 million signing bonus, which, by the way, is the biggest ever in NFL history. Put that with his 2018 salary, and he will be paid a total of $80 million by March 2019. All in all, with all of the escalators and the incentives and things like that are notoriously spread out in NFL contracts, and this deal is worth $134 million. And if he plays out this entire deal, which runs through the 2023 season, he will make roughly $176 million. Lord Jesus! Aaron Rodgers got bags. And you know, the crazy thing is, even with all the money bags that the Green Bay Packers just threw at number 12, he gave them a bargain. That sounds absolutely insane, right? And here's why. because Matthew Stafford in Detroit signed a $135 million contract last year for 5 years at $27 million a year. Now, Matthew Stafford's a good quarterback. He holds several franchise records in yards, completions, attempts, and touchdowns. But Matthew Stafford ain't Aaron Rodgers good. Captain Kirk over in Minnesota, Captain Kirk Cousins, he convinced Minnesota to give him $28 million a year for 3 years, fully guaranteed. And he's all right. He definitely ain't Aaron Rodgers good. Now, I'm not throwing slugs at any of these quarterbacks. All these guys are good. I think they'll be good for the situation that they're in. Well, at least in Kirk Cousins' case, he'll be good for the Vikings. I mean, the Vikings, they're not far away from being a Super Bowl contender. Well, they're already a contender. They're not far away from winning it all. So he'll be good in his situation. Matt Ryan's good. Matthew Stafford's good. So I'm not throwing slugs at these dudes. But Aaron Rodgers is on another level. And, I don't need to sit here and quote to you all of the stats and the records that Aaron Rodgers has smashed through the years. But this is the one quarterback who you can literally put on any team in the NFL and they automatically become a contender. You can put him on. I don't care if you put Aaron Rodgers on a team like the Browns, the Bears, the Broncos, the Dolphins, wherever. If you put this dude on a squad with everything he's able to do mentally and physically, because some people say we've never seen a quarterback like this because he's a little bit of so many of the greats. He has so many of the greats, so many of their best aspects wrapped up in one body. He brings so much to the table. You can put this dude literally on any squad in the National Football League, and they're in the Super Bowl conversation, period. Green Bay is consistently in the conversation, but their defense is what tends to hang them up historically. They won the Super Bowl back in 2010, and, back then they had a top 10 defense. But despite poor defense throughout the years in Green Bay, they're in the playoffs consistently with number 12 at the helm. So with number 12, no matter what's going on the other side of the ball, the minute he walks on the field, you have a chance. He's got that Peyton Manning type of flair about him, that Tom Brady type of flair about him, where these are cats that when you see him on the field, doesn't matter what's going on, doesn't matter how far you're down. When you see them walk on the field, you got a chance. Aaron Rodgers, make that paper, bruh. Aaron Donald. I told y'all earlier, it's a good week to be named Aaron in the National Football League. Aaron Donald, he backed up the Brinks truck this week as well after he and the Rams signed a contract extension at 6 years worth $135 million with $87 million guaranteed. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I definitely think it's about time this deal got done because they've been going back and forth with this the last 18 months, and finally they get it done and they put it to bed. This was the contract that set Khalil Mack's deal and situation. This was the contract that set everything in motion because really all him and his agent were waiting on was this contract to get done since they play a similar position, and then bam. With Aaron Donald back in the fold, the Los Angeles Rams got a hell of a squad. The Rams threw money at everybody and their mama over the summer. Todd Gurley got his. Brandon Cooks got his. Rob Havenstein got his. Aaron Donald got his, of course. They signed Ndamukong Suh. They traded for Aqib Talib. They traded for Marcus Peters. The only perceived potential weakness on this Rams defense, to me, is the linebacker core. But outside of that, and this defense with the front four and the secondary, those two levels of the defense are so good, they might be able to cover up that potential linebacker weakness. But outside of that, the Los Angeles Rams are stacked, like absolutely stacked. That's just the defensive side of the ball. I ain't even talked about the offensive side of the ball. So with the additions that they made on defense over the offseason, put that with the number one offense in the league last year. Now, as far as the offense goes, it might be a little bit harder for them to duplicate that offensive success. Now that teams, once teams get a good amount of film on you, they tend to be able to combat what you do better. But you put these two units all together. Now you add Aaron Donald back on the defense. You got Ndamukong Suh in the middle on that defense. Aaron Donald has 39 career sacks since coming into the league in 2014. You put all this together, and the Rams, to me, they're in the Super Bowl conversation, point blank. And then on top of that, you have Wade Phillips at the helm of this defense. And Wade Phillips is one of the defensive gurus in the National Football League. And as far as Aaron Donald holding out, I don't blame a player one bit for holding out for more money. Get your money, bruh. Because at the end of the day, if and when the shoe is on the other foot, these teams are always going to take care of the team. Because there's no loyalty in pro sports. And if you outperform your contract like Aaron Donald felt he had, you should be paid accordingly. Because if you underperform on your contract, the team has absolutely no problem in letting you know by either trading you or cutting you. So get your money, bruh. I got to send a special shout out to Elvis Dumervil, who retired Thursday after 12 years in the National Football League. Man, I still remember this dude when he sacked Tom Brady in Denver in a 2011 game in Denver. Elvis Dumervil came around the edge. I mean, he got the cleanest hit on Tom Brady that a defender could get on a quarterback. Put his helmet right between the numbers and decleated number 12. And it was one of the most beautiful sacks I have ever seen. Then, of course, we had that fax machine Bulljive that got him shipped out of Denver in 2013 or before the 2013 season. So that was unfortunate. But then he went over to Baltimore and he had a pretty good career over there. So shout out to Elvis Dumervil on a solid NFL career. He retires with 105.5 sacks. So all in all, solid career for Elvis Dumervil. Moving on in the lowest road, Tom Brady made headlines last week because he hung up on Boston radio station WEEI during a phone interview after they kept pressing him about his trainer, Alex Guerrero, being on the team plane, and Brady straight up telling him he didn't want to talk about it. Take a listen.
And so we saw the reports this weekend that Alex was on the team plane, which he wasn't for the second half of last year, I guess, and not on the sideline. Is that accurate?
Yeah, he was with me this last week, so it was, yeah.
So what changed in him not being on the team plane last year and this year? Was that just communication back and forth, or was that understanding of other things? What led to that being able to happen this year?
I'm not getting into all that.
Okay, yeah. I mean, when I ran into him at the Super Bowl last year in Minneapolis, I remember talking to you about at the time when I talked to him there. He had said in his opinion that all this stuff had been overblown, that he and Belichick actually had a pretty good relationship even then. Would you say that was true?
I said I don't want to get into it.
Okay, go ahead, Evan.
Yeah. I mean, everyone knows, it's well documented how, the work that he and I do together.
No, I know. I understand that. I'm just trying to figure out, because I saw the reports this weekend that he's traveling with the team. Was he on the sideline on Friday?
Yeah. All right, guys. Have a great day. I'll talk to you later.
Now, I'm not like the biggest advocate of hanging up on people. I mean, I understand why people do it. I mean, I've done it. But, with this instance, I have no issue whatsoever with Tom Brady hanging up on these dudes. Because, first of all, he's the face of this franchise, so, he can pretty much do what he wants when it comes to these. Well, I shouldn't say that, because I'm not a big fan of athletes and coaches being jerks to media people. I understand some of that can get annoying, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. But in this instance, it should be noted that WEEI didn't necessarily do anything wrong in asking the question, but also on the same token, Tom Brady didn't really do anything wrong by hanging up on him. Because where WEEI messed up is they kept asking him after he told them twice he didn't want to talk about it. So, it's like when the first time Tom Brady said, I'm not getting into all that, if they would have just dropped it, okay, cool. But then he tells them again, I'm not talking about it. And then they press him a third time. And I'm sitting here listening to this. I'm like, dude, what part of I don't want to talk about it do you not understand? This is a paid appearance for Tom Brady on this radio show. Now, obviously, Tom Brady doesn't need the money. So clearly he's got a relationship with somebody either at that station or who's connected to that station. He's doing it because he agreed to do it. Athletes, they do these contracted radio shows or radio appearances. Athletes in every sport in every major city, they tend to do these. Nothing new under the sun. But this is not some journalist who works for the team who's on a local beat for like a Boston media entity. So there's really no reason to try and press him for this answer after he said the first time he didn't want to talk about it. Like that's what I don't understand. And then on top of that, not only that had he already said he didn't want to talk about it, but it's like, dude, we already know what's been said about Tom Brady and his relationship with Alex Guerrero. It's well documented. Tom Brady's one of the best players to ever play the game. He led the Pats to 5 Super Bowl rings, 8 Super Bowl appearances. Do you really think this dude can't have a trainer or a business partner in the building and on the plane if he wants? Like, I don't know a team out there that wouldn't let like an all-pro, Hall of Fame type player, have this kind of, business partner, trainer, whatever. If they want to do that, they're more than welcome to do it. Now, other teams may do things differently, but at the end of the day, clearly, if Alex Guerrero is on the team playing, then clearly Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots, then at some degree, they've cleared it. So I really didn't understand why they felt the need to keep pressing him on it. Now some people brought up Alex Guerrero's past with the, some of the phony products that he endorsed and everything else. We all know about that, but at the end of the day, that really doesn't have a whole lot to do with this instance. I know some people brought that up, but to me, it didn't really have a whole lot to do with any of this. Now, true enough, all questions are fair about the sport, but, in this circumstance, when you have a partnership with a player, really the point is to keep them on the microphone. The point is to keep them talking, not tick them off to the point where they just don't want to talk to you anymore and just hang up on you. This is a Hall of Fame player, so you want to talk to him about the season. How does he feel going into his 41st year of existence on this planet, still playing at a high level? What's been different about this offseason as opposed to last offseason? Even if you wanted to humanize him a little bit, and ask him, what he had for breakfast or the things he likes to eat during the season as opposed to, is he a little bit more lenient in the offseason with what he puts in his body? Things he likes to do during the season in his spare time to kind of decompress a little bit. Humanize him a little bit. If you want to ask those kinds of questions, go for it. I mean, in these instances, that's what these instances are. Whenever that's the perfect opportunity to get to know the human side of these athletes, because at least for an athlete like Tom Brady, who's presented as like, some mythical god in NFL circles, the best way to humanize him is during appearances like this. But to keep asking that question after he politely said he didn't want to talk about it is not the wave. I mean, it's just not the best way you want to do it. Now, if this was an instance where it was like a press conference, or if you catch Tom Brady, well, he doesn't really do the interviews in front of his locker. But if this was a press conference or an interview like in front of his locker after the game, something like that, ask all the questions that you want. Because at that point, he's free game. At that point, that's the old saying, there's a time and a place for everything. Those are the times and places to go about a question like this. Those are the times and places where you do it in this instance. It's all about the environment. And I've worked in media for some time, and this is one of the things that would bug me the most with the business. If somebody said that they don't want to talk about something, let it go. Because at the end of the day, relationships in the media business are everything. And, I mean, it's all about building relationships. It's all about building those connections with people across the different, parts of the media landscape. And the minute you put some turbulence in a relationship, or the minute you put a stain on a relationship, it spreads, and it's hard to get that. It's hard to gain that trust back. Like, it's hard to get it back once you put a stain on a relationship. I'm not saying this instance put a stain on WEEI's relationship with Tom Brady, but it definitely didn't do anything to help it. It's one thing to go into an interview with prepared questions that you think won't upset the subject, but when they say they don't want to talk about something, just drop it. Let it go, bro. Just let it go. All right, what we got coming up next? It's time for I'm In and I'm Out. The Oakland Raiders stunned everybody in the football world by getting in a standoff with Khalil Mack, who just happens to be their best player, and ultimately trading him to the Bears on Saturday. Well, first of all, let me say, I am all all the way in on how this played out, as are the Denver Broncos and every other team in the AFC West. Now, the Chicago Bears, they got Khalil Mack, a 2020 second rounder, a conditional fifth rounder in 2020. And so essentially with that, the Bears got their second round pick back. Like, that blew my mind when I saw that. The Raiders got a 2019 and 2020 first round picks. They got a 2019 sixth rounder and a 2020 third rounder. Now, my biggest question with this whole deal is, what are the Raiders doing? Like, dog, what are y'all doing? I mean, this reminds me of back in 2009 when Josh McDaniels got hired as the Broncos coach. Then he came to Denver and almost immediately started blowing up the team. He traded Jay Cutler to the Bears, coincidentally. He traded Brandon Marshall to the Dolphins, I believe it was. And then he turns around, he traded Tony Scheffler to the Detroit Lions. It's like, dude, that was three of the offensive centerpieces for the Broncos back then. So he came in and he basically blew up the team. And with John Gruden and the Oakland Raiders making this move, this reminds me of that. Now, I can't say if John Gruden had that much control. Josh McDaniels had a lot of control and a lot of say in those instances. I can't say if John Gruden has that much say. I personally believe he does, but every team operates different. But yeah, at the end of the day, this is, fair or not, this is going to go on John Gruden's watch because this happened while he was the head coach in the building. Oakland botched this entire deal from the start, period. I mean, not talking to the dude since February. Well, I think they talked to him like one time. But, I mean, this is not some role player, that you felt like you could just find in the draft or you could just go out and get some dude off the street to fill his role. I mean, certain players, you can do that kind of stuff and you can get away with it. But this dude is Hall of Fame level talent. He's in his prime. He's a player you drafted. He's an all-pro. He doesn't stay injured. He's a great guy off the field. And he's your best player, period. Not your best player on defense, your best player on your roster, period. And you trade him. This move makes very little sense to me. I mean, as much as I like it because he's out of the AFC West and the Broncos don't have to face him twice a year now, this move makes very little sense to me because it seems to me like Oakland didn't even try to make this work. I mean, I know that they have their parameters and things like that they offer to him and things like that, but I don't know, man. I'm just one of those people, man, where to me it seems like teams are a little too easy and a little too it seems like too easily teams lean on the whole this is just the business part of football aspect. I don't know. It just, on the surface, man, it just didn't seem like that they did as much as they could do when it came to doing everything that they could to get him. I mean, you have the franchise tag. Why not franchise him? That's what the franchise tag is for. The franchise tag is essentially, I remember watching an interview with Pat Bowlen. This is about 10 or 11 years ago. And I remember him saying he was one of the owners who was in favor of the franchise tag because the franchise tag gives the team and the players representation. It buys them more time to be able to work out a long-term deal. And I don't understand why Oakland didn't try, to push further for the franchise tag to buy themselves more time. So this didn't make any sense to me. Then the word comes out that the Raiders traded a 5th-round pick for A.J. McCarron. A.J. McCarron. They traded a 5th-round pick for A.J. McCarron. Okay. Then they released Martavis Bryant, who they gave up a 3rd-rounder for earlier this offseason. Like, dog, what are y'all doing in Oakland, man? I don't get some of these moves. Well, now, to Oakland's defense, to be fair, Martavis Bryant, he's facing another suspension. So, from that aspect, yeah, I can understand why they would want to release Martavis Bryant, but, you still gave up a 3rd-round pick. And that's, with his history, I don't even understand why you gave up a pick that high. I would have tried to give away a lower round pick, but I don't run the Raiders, so I don't get paid to do that kind of stuff. I don't get it. Some people say John Gruden is setting up to be a disaster so far, and I hate to be that guy. I'm not going to go as far to say that, but when you see moves like this, it's hard to argue with that viewpoint. Now, Khalil Mack signed a 6-year, $141 million deal with the Bears on Saturday, which gave him $90 million guaranteed. Now that makes him the highest paid defensive player in the National Football League. Now, this dude had 10 sacks against the Broncos in 8 career games. So, dear Oakland Raiders, from the Denver Broncos and Broncos fans in Broncos country, thank you for messing this up. All right, my dog Teddy Bridgewater was traded to the Saints last week in exchange for a third-round pick to the Jets. I'm all in on this. Like, y'all know how much I like Teddy Bridgewater as a quarterback, as a person. Like, I like this trade because with this kind of offense, because with the kind of offense that Sean Payton runs, he needs a highly accurate quarterback. Teddy Bridgewater, he doesn't have the biggest arm, but he's a very accurate quarterback. Now, as far, Drew Brees is still there for at least the next year. He signed a 2-year deal in the offseason, so he's the possible successor to Drew Brees whenever he walks away or if and when the Saints release him, because you can't leave that possibility out. He's got the potential to play in Sean Payton's offense in an indoor stadium, which the weather's always good. It's in a southern division where a lot of your road games are in warmer climate cities, so that's going to be good. In that instance, I really like this move for Teddy Bridgewater, but from a football standpoint, I can think of no better coach and no better offense, no better situation for Teddy Bridgewater to be in at this point in his career as he's still, kind of rehabbing his way and working his way back from that knee injury. And as far as that injury, man, think about how far this dude has come. Just 2 years ago, he suffered a knee injury that was so bad that doctors thought he could potentially lose his leg. Like, that in and of itself is amazing. So the fact that he didn't lose his leg, first of all, after this injury, because his knee was gone. That leg injury was horrific. So the fact that he didn't lose his leg is a blessing first and foremost. Then he was a free agent. Then he goes to the Jets on a prove-it deal to the rest of the NFL that he could bounce back. Now he's recovered to the point where a team felt comfortable enough, not just any team, but a team with a great quarterback-coach combo, Hall of Fame quarterback, Hall of Fame coach. Now he's recovered to the point where a team like the Saints were willing to part with a third-round pick just to get him. So with New Orleans giving up that kind of pick, that to me that tells me that the Saints know something that the rest of us don't. So, clearly, to me, they've sat down and they've talked to Drew Brees and they've, kind of got a pretty good feel as to what he's going to do in the future. So with them surrendering a third-round pick for Teddy Bridgewater, it kind of makes you wonder, could this possibly be Drew Brees' last year in New Orleans? I mean, could this possibly be Drew Brees' last year playing football altogether? I sincerely hope not, because Drew Brees is my favorite quarterback in the league right now. But it tells me that something, they know something that the rest of us don't. Either that or they're very confident that they can re-sign Teddy Bridgewater after this season is over and convince him to learn behind Brees for another year. And maybe Teddy Bridgewater is good with that. It could be an instance where, he's not in a rush to get back on the field to be a starter. I mean, I know there's a part of him that wants to. That competitive edge is what drives athletes to be great. So I'm sure that aspect is there, but by the same time, it's like, given how far he's come from, it makes you kind of wonder where his head is at. So, I mean, I thought that aspect of it was interesting. Now, if they can extend Teddy Bridgewater, this trade is a home run, point blank. But if they can't extend Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Brees stays for another year, they struck out with that one. But either way, I'm happy for my dog, Teddy Bridgewater. Jerry Jones is in favor of an 18-game schedule and says, quote, "I think, candidly, it's an expanded regular season. It's probably physically better for players than it is to have the longer preseason, the longer practicing. Our studies show that we actually have a ramped-up injury situation with players playing during preseason as opposed to the injury factor in the regular season," end quote. I'm all out on this, and I don't know what study Jerry Jones is looking at, but this is a terrible idea all around. First of all, from a player safety standpoint, this is bad. From a football standpoint, this is bad. The player safety angle is self-explanatory, as that's just more hits that players' bodies will have to absorb to take on an expanded schedule. Plus, with the schedule being the way it is now, if you make the playoffs, you're already playing more than 16 games, thus absorbing more hits on your body. And now the NFL, they can't preach player safety and then go and try to enact something like this. On top of the fact that the NFL, they're still involved with this CTE lawsuit. So, with this lawsuit going on, and then the NFL is trying to preach player safety, and then with this new helmet rule and all these new rules and stuff that they're making for the safety of the game, you can't go and do all this and then try to add in, 2 more regular season games. I can't get down with that. And to me, I don't think the players are definitely against it. They're not going to be with it for the simple fact that for an 18-game schedule, I guarantee you the NFL Players Association is going to want a bigger roster. Well, you have to wonder, do players want a bigger roster? Because that means that's going to be less money in their pockets to accommodate more players. You also have to wonder, do the owners want to pay more players to have an expanded roster? So from a financial standpoint, it's kind of like, well, I don't see how this would work. And, an 18-game schedule is not anything new. I mean, the NFL has been trying to do this for the last, good part of, 18, 20 years. They've been talking about an 18-game schedule. I still remember, Troy Aikman talking about how players were against an 18-game schedule. And this is back in his playing days when he was still with the Cowboys. So the NFL, this is something that they've been pondering and trying to figure out how to get over or how to pass through. They've been trying to do this for a while. Now, from a football standpoint, this is a terrible idea, because you can't – how are you going to develop and evaluate players on 2 preseason games? Because, if you're trying to build a football team, to build a football team, guys need reps. I mean, that's how guys get better. They get better by reps in practice and as well as game reps. From your starters to your 2s and your 3s, guys need reps. They don't do 2-a-day padded practices anymore with the way the CBA is set up. They don't do 2-a-day practices anymore. They don't wear pads in practices a lot anymore. And practices aren't structured like they used to be. So guys are already on a limited number of reps and snaps anyway, from the starters down to the reserves. There's only so many reps that can go around with the way things are set up now. So with that, from that, it begs that question: how do you develop and evaluate players on 2 preseason games? So you have that question there. How do we develop and evaluate players on 2 preseason games? Because the only way to get better at football is by playing football. The only way to see how a guy reacts in football situations is in football situations, which happen during a football game. The only way to get stronger playing football is to play football. Well, the only way to become a stronger football player is to play football. The only way to become better at football is to play football. You can do all the simulations that you want in practice and everything else, but nothing gives you the same feel and the same situations of a football game than an actual football game. And I know fans will say, well, preseason isn't actual football. Well, if you're trying to build a football team, a preseason game is extremely important. It's just as important as the regular season games, because you're trying to see how guys react in certain situations. You're trying to see how they act in certain situations. You're trying to see what their strengths are in football situations, what their weaknesses are in football situations. You're trying to see what plays work better for your offense with the players on offense skill sets as well as defense. You're trying to see all these different things, and preseason gives you the best chance to do that. The only people who really don't like preseason is the fans. That's it. Especially the ones who have season tickets. Now, me, I'm an NFL fan. I love the preseason because I like to see guys who are on roster bubbles. I like to see them make the team, and I like to see if a team's going to be able to find a diamond in the rough type of guy. Like some undrafted free agent comes about, like Phillip Lindsay in Denver. I didn't even know who this dude was until the preseason. So now he's on the Broncos roster. That's why I love the preseason. You get to see you get to see a guy who otherwise might not have made the team without this opportunity. You get to see this dude have a chance to shine. Like, player discovery is big in the preseason. That's how Terrell Davis got discovered in Denver. In 1995, in a preseason game over in Japan, I think it was, against the San Francisco 49ers, Terrell Davis, who was a rookie, runs down on a kickoff return, and I mean, he just pops the 49ers kickoff returner. And from that instance on, that's how Terrell Davis got his name noticed. Now you look at Terrell Davis, two-time Super Bowl winner, a Super Bowl MVP, Hall of Fame player. So that the preseason, that's what it's for. You know, preseason games are very important in trying to build a team. But like I said, the only people who really have a problem with the preseason is the fans. And with the NFL, I would caution the NFL. What the fans say is important. I get it. But I would also caution the NFL in listening to the fans too much. Because it's like Bill Parcells says, if you listen to the fans, you'll be in the stands with them. And that is so true. Because if they try to do this, it's going to do nothing but water down the NFL product. You know, now season ticket holders, they don't like preseason. They tend not to like preseason games because they're forced to purchase the 2 home preseason games in their season ticket package. I completely understand that. But one way that the NFL could kind of help alleviate that is to explain to fans, you know, how the price breakdown goes for their tickets. So, for instance, like if your season ticket package is $1,000, well, you got the 8 regular season games and the 2 preseason games. So what the NFL could do in an instance like that is they could say, you know what, for these 8 regular season games, you're paying $112.50 for each game for your seat. Okay, well, that $112.50 times 8, that's $900. Plus, you have the 2 preseason games at $50 each. So that $900, that's $900 plus $900 for the regular season games, $100 for the preseason games. Now what you've done is you've explained to the fan why the tickets are priced the way they are. Now, you haven't changed the price of the tickets. You've just explained to the fans where their money's actually going. And I guarantee you, if you do that, you trick fans without having to trick them, because all you're doing is explaining to them what the deal is. And I guarantee you, fans will appreciate that a lot more than trying to do all of this, you know, cramming an 18-game schedule down everybody's throats. I guarantee you, if you explain to fans where their money's going and why it's going and why it's being divided out that way, fans will understand. Fans are a lot smarter than what people think they are. So with football, I mean, you know, teams already treat the first 4 games like the preseason anyway. There's a reason why football gets better in October and November, because September is basically teams are still figuring out what they like to do in situations. Teams in a lot of ways are still figuring out, you know, guys' tendencies and stuff in September. And on top of that, you know, dudes tend to get stronger as the season goes on. So, you know, by the time October and November rolls around, I mean, these teams, they're rolling on all cylinders. So fans just got to be patient. You know, that's all it is. People just got to be patient. But, you know, in my opinion, the NFL schedule is fine the way it is. We don't need more regular season games, because if your team makes the playoffs, that squad is already playing an extra 3 to 4 games, depending on how far they get. We don't need any more regular season games. NFL, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Your product is fine in this aspect the way it is. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Pacman Jones signed a 1-year deal with the Broncos last week to be a punt return, kick returner, as well as veteran depth in the secondary. I'm all in on this signing. Now, of course, the last time we saw Pacman, he was beating the brakes off that airport employee in Atlanta. But that was the employee's fault. That employee never should have bothered him, because Pacman, he was just walking down the airport, walking through the terminal with his pies, with his, you know, 2-piece dinner and his drink. You know, next thing you know, this employee starts getting in his face, talking all this trash, and, you know, Pacman had to lay them hands on him. You know, airport employee, he caught them hands. But, you know, and the worst part of it, Pacman dropped his pies. Oh, no, hell no. You can't be dropping the 2-piece, bruh. But in all honesty, man, this is a low risk, medium to high reward signing for the Broncos. I like this signing because the thing I like the most about Pacman is when he was asked about his past in his introductory press conference, he didn't shy away from his mistakes, and he wants to use his story to help kids. And that's what I like the most is, and a lot of Broncos fans are like, oh, how dare the Broncos sign him? Da, 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 da. And, he has no class. He shouldn't be on this team. Kill that noise because nobody's perfect, first of all. And I don't mind guys having a second chance, because especially a guy like Pacman who, man, I had even forgot Pacman was in the league, to be honest with you, because when he was out in Cincinnati, he quietly put together a really solid career over there. For the last 8 years, he was in Cincinnati, and you really didn't hear a whole lot about Pacman in negative headlines. I mean, he stayed out of trouble. Pacman has truly turned his life around, and from that aspect, man, I respect him, and I'm proud of him in that aspect because a guy who can make mistakes early in his life and in his career, as we all have, a guy who can make his mistakes and learn from them and then use them to better himself throughout life, I'm all for that. And that really gets me when I hear people, try to blast somebody for something that they've done in the past, because at the end of the day, if people were to judge you or I for some of the things that we did when we were younger, if they were to hold that against us, 10, 15 years down the road, we would be upset, especially if you've taken major steps to turn stuff around. So, you can't just judge somebody based on what they did 10, 15 years past. I mean, you can, but none of us are God. We don't have the right to judge. God is the only one that can judge us. And if God has forgiven Pacman Jones, then who am I or who are you not to have, look past it? So, the Lord Jesus Christ, he looks past my sins every day. So I'm not finna sit up here and blast somebody for mistakes that they made in the past. I'm happy that Pacman is in Denver. It gives us a nice, low-risk veteran signing, veteran depth in the secondary, and that's exactly what we needed. Now, I was shocked to kind of hear that he'll wear number 24 during his time in Denver, because 24 is a highly, highly regarded number in Denver and is actually unofficially retired. The Broncos unofficially retired the number 24 after Champ Bailey ascended to greatness in it during his time in the Mile High City. Now, a lot of fans were ticked off at this development because they felt like the Broncos were disrespecting Champ Bailey for someone else to wear his number after it had been stashed away for so long. But, the Broncos equipment manager called Champ, and he asked if it was okay for Pacman to wear his number. So Champ Bailey gave his blessing for Pacman to wear his number, and that's that. Like, as long as Champ Bailey's good with it, I'm good with it. I remember when Bradley Roby got drafted, he wanted to wear number 24 because he was a big Champ Bailey fan. John Elway straight up told him no, because that's how much respect and reverence for Champ Bailey that John Elway and the Broncos have for Champ Bailey. He straight up told him no, and thus Bradley Roby picked number 29. There's been a few guys that have wanted to wear number 24 since Champ retired, and the Broncos have told him no. So I thought that was really cool that the Broncos thought enough of Champ to call him and ask him, could Pacman wear his number? And the only reason why the Broncos even considered it is because Pacman is a veteran who's put together a nice career in the NFL. So as long as Champ is good with it, I'm good with it. I respect Pacman for the way he's turned things around. Didn't hear much of him about a negative light until the airport incident. And he dropped his Popeyes. Man, that's some Bulljive. Speaking of Bulljive, it's time for This Is Some Bulljive. Serena Williams wore a black bodysuit for her appearance in the French Open a week and some change ago, and then the president of the French Open said that can't happen because it's disrespectful to the tournament. Man, dude, go somewhere with that Bulljive. How in the world was this bodysuit disrespectful to the French Open? Like, Serena and this is what I don't get. Serena and Venus both have been the subjects of racial controversies in the past, and both of them have handled them with class each and every time. Now, this particular controversy, this is not racial, but Serena handled this one the way she always does, by taking the high road and not getting caught up in the Bulljive. Serena Williams is the greatest female tennis player to play the game, and she's arguably the greatest female athlete ever in any sport. period. And then this French Open president chooses to be petty over this bodysuit. Like, that was so dumb to me. Like, if he had that much of a problem with it, he could have just said that in private. Like, he didn't even have to say nothing in public to try to embarrass her like that. Especially when you consider the fact that she wore it to help with her blood circulation to prevent blood clots that tended to develop while she was pregnant. So she was wearing this bodysuit to help prevent blood clots to keep her from possibly dying. But some way, somehow, that was disrespectful. Anyway, the suit was in good taste. She wasn't showing any skin, and it wasn't suggestive in any form. Serena Williams is a curvy woman. I know Serena's style is to be classy and take the high road. I'm all for that. But I ain't gonna lie. This is the one time I wish Serena Williams would have just dared the French Open to stop her by suspending her or kicking her out of the tournament altogether. Because I guarantee you they wouldn't do it. She brings in way too much money, too many endorsements, and too many sponsors for them to even touch this woman. She's why tennis is as popular as it is. Because I know me, I personally did not care for tennis until her and Venus. I personally did not care for tennis until her and Venus started dominating the sport. So, she's your most important figure in your sport, and this is what you choose to focus on in this instance. Man, get out of here with that Bulljive. It's time for the last segment of the Undrafted Podcast. Oh, it's the last segment of the podcast, Kicking It. Eminem surprised the entire planet with an overnight album that literally nobody, knew was coming. Kamikaze was released on Thursday and immediately set social media and the internet on straight up fire. And for good reason. Because, man, when I tell you this album is fire, this album is straight up fire. Like, I'm not even the biggest Eminem fan. I mean, he does good work, but I'm not like, a hardcore Eminem fan, like live by Eminem, die by Eminem. I'm not anything like that. But Eminem did his thing on this album. This album is a banger from start to finish. If you have not listened to Kamikaze, pick up Kamikaze or get it on Spotify, stream it, download it, whatever, and you will not be disappointed. Now, me personally, I generally wait a little while for an album to kind of soak and marinate before I buy it because I like to see what the folks have to say about it. I like to get fan reviews and things like that so I can kind of go in with tempered expectations. So, but with this one generated so much buzz that I just had to see what all the fuss was about. So I got it on Spotify, and man, I am so glad I did not wait to listen to this album. This album is a banger. Eminem is not the MC that any rapper or MC wants any smoke with. And for good reason, because on this album, I mean, he dragged half the industry. I mean, he did not hold back on this album. I mean, when have you ever known Eminem to hold back on any of his albums? He dragged these mumble rappers like Lil Yachty, Lil Xan, Lil Pump, MGK, even more conventional cats, Drake, Joe Budden, Donald Trump, Mike Pence, and he didn't stop there. Like Eminem, he pulled no punches. I mean, he came after him. But, the thing I liked most about this project is how Eminem dropped such a great album without saying a word to absolutely anybody. And this album, man, is deep. Like, Eminem gets deep on this album. He talks about the flop of his last album, Revival. He talks about the death of DJ Proof, which ultimately led to D12 falling apart. And he talks about some more deep subjects. Like, I like this album. And he dropped this album out of nowhere, and in less than 24 hours, it was the #1 streaming and downloaded album in the world. Track 2, Greatest, that's my favorite song on this album. I mean, that beat is ridiculous. Like I said, man, if you haven't checked out this album, go check this album out ASAP. You won't regret it. Well, that's my time for this week's episode of the Undrafted Podcast. I want to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for blessing me with the gifts, the talents, and the resources to do this podcast. Thank you for tuning into this podcast. I am having so much fun with this rebrand, and it's given me so much energy and revitalization, and it's revitalized this podcast, and I am so excited about what's coming with this podcast. Got more great content coming up for you next week. This podcast is now available on Spotify. So if you have Spotify, look up the podcast, download it there. If you want to follow the Undrafted Podcast on social media, the Undrafted Podcast on Instagram, the Undrafted Pod on Twitter. Like I said, the NFL, their week 1 starts next Sunday, so we'll definitely be talking about the Broncos and the Seahawks and some other NFL games. We got some upcoming college games. So this is the best time of year, and I am so excited. I just can't hide it. And remember, do your best and let God handle the rest. Be blessed.